Hello and welcome back. We're going to work on creating a digital input now. So to do that, the first thing you're going to need to do is, let's go over to my little diagram here, and you're going to want to wire your Gemma board up in the same way that I've done here. So you can see this alligator clip is holding on right here to the 3 volt pin right there. And then you can also see the other alligator clip is hooked into the digital one right there. You can see that these are both plugged into the button right here, and make sure your button is oriented the right way with the pins sticking in the correct way that I have it here. So what we're going to do, make sure that's all correct there, and then what we're going to do is go back to our code, and we're going to go through our code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this section of code. And I'm just going to delete that time because we're not going to use that for this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create an object called a button. We need to import the same module, so the digital input-output module needs to be imported. Now inside that digital I/O, we bring the digital in-out component of that so we can set it to either an input or an output, and we need to decide what pin we are going to use. And in this example, our input or button is going to be using D1 on the Gemma. So let's go back here, and you can see D1 right there is the pin that we are going to be using as our button input. Okay, so let's go back here. So now I'm going to hit enter, and now what I want to do is I want to define my button as an input. So I'm going to go switch to input, and then the parentheses on the end. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So what we need to do is, and I'm just going to switch back to the actual diagram here, is we need to make this pin right here 0 volts. So as it sits right now, this pin is what's called a floating point or floating number. So it can be ranging from, it could be 1.8 volts, it could be 3.2 volts, it's floating all over the place. We don't want that. We want it to be at either 0 or 3.3 volts. And for this example, you can see that we have 3.3 volts flowing through this flowing through this jumper right here, and it stays right here, and as soon as I press that button, that 3.3 volts continues on its path and goes into that digital 1 pin right there. So what we want to do is when we push that button down, we want to make sure that this is changing from 0 volts to 3.3 volts. To do that, we need to set this pin as 0 volts. To do that, we need to create what's called a pull. So I'm going to put this D, a pull down. So pull down is going to be 0 volts. And if we were to do pull up, would be the opposite. And that's going to be 3.3 volts. Okay, so to do that, to make sure that this is 0 volts and it's not a floating voltage, we need to go back to our code. So I'm just going to dump this out here, and we put that parameter inside these brackets here. So what we do is we go digital IO again, and we go dot, and then we're going to go pull. And then we're going to go another dot, and we're going to go, you have only 2 choices, up or down, and we're going to go down, because down makes it 0 volt or ground. And that's important because we want to change the state of that pin. We want to change the state of that pin when we push the button, when those 2 jumpers connect. When we push that button down, we want it to change to 3.3 volts. So now let's go down here and let's do our while true, which makes that loop again, and we're going to make this fairly straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're going to go LED dot value, and if you remember, value is basically a property that is going to determine what what our voltage is going to be, true or false, on or off, 0 or 3.3 volts. And we want the LED value to equal exactly the same as the button value. Button dot value. So that value. So what that means is when, and just checking a loop here again and again and again, when the button value is off or not pressed, it's at false, so there's nothing going on. When I do press it, it turns the LED on, or L, the button on the board. I'm gonna have my board up here. That little tiny L, you can see the little L right there. I'll actually circle it for you. That should turn on. So when I'm pressing the button down, it's turning on, and when I'm releasing the button, it's turning off. Because when I'm pressing the button, 3.3 volts is flowing through these jumpers and going to here and creating 3.3 volts on that pin. When I'm releasing the button, the state of this pin is going back down to 0 because it is set to pull down, or 0. Okay, hopefully it's a lot to take in, but hopefully that made sense, and we'll talk a little bit more about this.